Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. FPL Vincenzo here, and a little bit of a bonus pod, should we call this one. A little bit different to normal. I'm planning to do 2 pods this week because I will be on wildcard ahead of FPL Gameweek 35, so I'll do a pod talking about that. But obviously this is a pod sort of midway through Gameweek 34. We still have Man United versus Brentford tonight, and I still have multiple players involved in that game. But I wanted to talk about what's happened so far in Gameweek 34, and a pod more focused on decision making and how I like to make decisions. There's plenty of content creators out there that have little slogans and mottos, and the majority of them, if not all of them, are all valid. And I look at James from Planet FPL, who always says, play it your way. And I think that's quite significant here, and one of the most important parts of the game, because we all have different objectives, we all have different reactions to things. And the reason I wanted to pod about this topic this week is because I made a mistake. Not necessarily in the decision-making process, because the decision, I think, to many managers would be valid. The decision would have made sense to a lot of people, but it wasn't how I like to play the game. And I lost sight, I think, on Friday before the deadline, on my main sort of criteria for making an FPL pick. And so I wanted to talk about that now and get everybody thinking about reasons for making close calls, and then see where that leads us. So I'm going to jump on to where I stand at the moment in Game Week 34. And it's not outright an absolute disaster. I'm on 35 points, Game Week rank of 3 million. And I still have 3 players tonight. Bruno Fernandes as captain, and double Brentford with Thiago up front and Sepp Vandenberg in defence. So very likely I end with a reasonable rank this week. And I'm already 10 points above the average with 3 to go. I know it's not been a great week for free hitters. I didn't manage to squeeze a pod out before the Game Week 34 deadline, but I ended up using both my 2 free transfers on 1 week punts. I really wanted Eberechi Eze in my team, and I had Anthony Gordon unavailable. I basically was starting the game week with 10 players because James Hill didn't have a fixture, Erling Haaland didn't have a fixture, Hugo Ekitike for Liverpool was injured for the season, Anthony Gordon ruled out. So I had to use at least 1 transfer to get 11 players out, and I ended up using both my transfers to give myself a sub. And Eze was the player I wanted the most in terms of a 1 week punt as a bit of a differential, someone I thought had quite a good ceiling this week. It obviously ended up scoring in Arsenal's win over Newcastle, so that was valid. The second transfer, I was unsure what to do. None of the strikers I desperately wanted this week. There was obviously Jared Bowen for West Ham against Everton, who did very well, 2 assists. Alexander Isak was on radar, he obviously scored. Brian Brobby wasn't written off either. Sunderland at home to Forest, that obviously ended up 5-0 to Forest, but going into that week, I think most people would have thought Sunderland had good possibilities in that game. Dom Solanke was an option for the striker, given Wolves' struggles. And then there was obviously Ollie Watkins playing for my team. And I decided that Watkins was in quite a lot of free hit drafts, was clearly in form right now. And I thought Villa would beat Fulham. So because I had Watkins and Morgan Rogers, that then caused me to bench Joachim Andersen, because I didn't want to play 2 of my Aston Villa attackers versus one of my Fulham defenders. I don't really like to sort of sit in the middle of the fence, or sit on the fence, as the saying goes. So I took a stance. Villa would beat Fulham. I played my 2 attackers. That caused me to bench the Fulham defender. And he's obviously then ended up getting a clean sheet, max BPS, and some DEFCON, and I've benched an 11-pointer. We all bench points from time to time. It's not the fact there's 11 points sat on my bench that's bothering me here. It's the decision-making process that got me to this point. And this is what I want to talk about the most today. So in this particular example, I'm an Aston Villa fan. So going into that Aston Villa Fulham game, and it's the early kickoff on Saturday afternoon, I've got all my eggs in one basket. I want Aston Villa to win as a supporter, and I'm cheering on two of my biggest FPL assets in that fixture. If that goes wrong, i.e., as it did, I'm leaving myself with a big disappointment on Saturday afternoon. If it goes wrong, I've benched a Hall, as I've done. I kind of was aware Anderson's probably got a good chance of getting DEFCON, but I wasn't maybe expecting the clean sheet and the max bonus as well. So come 2 o'clock, 2:30 on Saturday, I'm now annoyed that Aston Villa haven't won. I'm now annoyed I've got bare minimum FPL points, 4 from my 2 Aston Villa players, and I'm annoyed as well because I've got 11 points sat on my bench. My motto / slogan for this game is, if I'm caught in 2 or 3 minds around what to do, to look at all the scenarios that play out in the best and worst case. And I try and view them from the stance of what would annoy me more if something happened. Clearly, what was going to annoy me the most here, before making my transfers on Friday night, was picking 2 Aston Villa players, watching them blank, and watching my Fulham defender get a clean sheet. Because clearly the best outcome for Aston Villa in that situation is a 0-0 draw. I left myself open to having a disappointing Saturday. And as with this game, I've been playing this game for like 20 years now. And you learn how to cope. You learn how to control your mental health. You know how to limit frustration. You learn how to not let FPL decisions and FPL outcomes impact on your family time. Ultimately, this is a game. And ultimately, everyone's aware, I think, that even with the best decision making, you're still very reliant on luck and variance. You could have Erling Haaland as a captain against a non-league team. That doesn't guarantee you hat tricks and multiple goals. He could still blank in that game. You still need an element of luck and variance to get the points you feel like you deserve, feel like you're guaranteed to get. So there's no outcome that's guaranteed. So often I'm usually good with, once I make my decisions, I'm normally satisfied I've made them for the right reasons. And then the game week can play out as it plays out. If I get unlucky, I get unlucky. If I don't get what I feel like I deserve, that's the rub of the green. That's what ultimately will dictate where you finish overall in the game. The more luck you get, the higher you'll finish. And I stand by a point I think I've said on here before, that I think most good FPL managers, if luck is fairly balanced, they will probably finish about 100k. If you're below 100k and you're a seasoned manager who does well, largely you've probably been unlucky. You may have made a few bad decisions as well. And if you finish in sort of top 5k, you've had a lot of luck and opportunity fall in your favour. I think, there's enough good FPL managers now. I think 100k is a good finish for someone who has a decent balance of luck. So I'm good with that. I've made my peace with that. And as long as I make decisions for the right reasons, I don't get overly frustrated if things don't turn out the way I hope they were. Obviously, we go into most game weeks with high expectations and feeling like we're going to have a really good week because of the choices we've made and the reasons behind it. But going back to my slogan and my sort of thought process, I went into Friday night with about 5 different strikers I could have picked. I wasn't confident on any of them. So whichever one I picked was going to be a bit punty. And there was half an hour until the deadline and I still hadn't done anything because I didn't know what to do. And it's quite unusual for me to be quite indecisive. I feel like normally I'm quite clear in my decision making with valid reasoning. Might not be reason everyone agrees with, but it's reasons that make sense to me. But this week I wasn't sure. Did I want to punt Dom Solanke and hope that Tottenham reverse form against Wolves? Jared Bowen, I wasn't particularly keen I wanted because for a 1 week punt, I wanted someone I felt like could score a hat trick, not a striker who's basically playing on the wing and taking corners. Clearly, there's routes to points with him, including DEFCON, but I didn't feel like he had the big ceiling. I had Robbie, but did I really trust Sunderland? And did I want someone playing in that Friday night game? And then Isak, it was just the most wild of punts. But did I feel like Liverpool would beat Crystal Palace? Yes, I already had 2 Liverpool players. Did I want to go all in on that? My problem with him was I didn't think he'd play 90 minutes. So did I want a player who's going to play like 60? So ultimately, what I should have done really in that situation is not made the striker transfer. I should have just put Ekatike on the bench and played Joachim Andersen and had 11 out. And I could have rolled one more transfer through to post wildcard to use in either game week 36, 37 or 38. But I don't know if I was impacted by the noise. I don't know if I was impacted by a bit of FOMO. I don't know if I felt like I was in a bit of trouble taking on the free hits this week, but I went chasing and I made the second transfer. And of all the strikers, which one did I trust the most? In my head, I trusted Ollie Watkins the most, considering how Villa had been playing and considering his recent form. What I didn't know was that Amadou Onana was injured. I don't think many Villa fans did know that. And as soon as I saw the lineup on Saturday, I thought this isn't good for Watkins because we've lost a key component of our midfield and a key component of our ball progression, etc., etc. But I say the thing that's frustrating me the most here is that I put myself into the position to get annoyed. If I would have picked Dom Solanke, I wouldn't have got any more points. In fact, I think he got 1 point because he went off injured. But if I would have picked Dom Solanke, I think I would have played Joachim Andersen. And I would have benched Sepp van den Berg. Sepp van den Berg on paper was my worst player here. An away fixture. Probably if you went on to a Solio or someone like that, I don't tend to use those sites. But I imagine of all my squad, he would have been the player this week who was expected to score the fewest points. I think clean sheet wise, Brentford were the worst of my defenders. He was the logical bench. But I say because if I'd have picked Solanke or Brobby or Bowen or someone like that, or even Isak, I would have benched Sepp van den Berg. But I didn't feel like I could play a defender against two attackers. So an indecisive striker decision then caused me to not bench the right defender and caused me to put too much faith and emphasis on my own team. Now, I don't think that's unusual in FPL. I've known, going back a few years now, an Arsenal season ticket holder. This was when Gareth Bale was playing for Tottenham the first time round. He was listed in FPL, I think, as a 5 million defender, but he was playing left wing and he was getting outcomes quite often. If you think Nico O'Reilly is a good choice in defence this year for attacking returns, Gareth Bale was even better in that season. My Arsenal supporting friend refused to pick Gareth Bale because he was a Tottenham player. So we all have our reasons and our biases for making FPL decisions. I've had a bias before that I don't like trusting my own team because of how it can leave you feeling. If you're supporting Aston Villa, in my case, and you need them to win both for the team's performances in the league and your FPL team, I don't like the ups and downs of that. Obviously, I could be in a super good mood if Aston Villa win and both my attacking players get returns. But I could be in a super bad mood if I get nothing and Villa lose. And to try and control my mental health, one of my things is to try and keep that more balanced. Don't leave yourself open to the super crazy highs and in particular the super bad lows. So I try not to triple up on Villa a lot, and I certainly don't want double attack or double defence. You might catch me with one attacker and one defender sometimes, but usually that's about it. So I put myself in that position. I was going out with my family on Saturday afternoon. Villa had the early kickoff. It was all round a stupid move. And in panic, a half hour before the deadline, I made it. Watkins, in theory, this isn't outcome bias talking. I would still be saying this if Watkins got a goal and got 6-8 points here, that it wasn't the right reason to make that transfer. I think as a manager, you have to look at how you play the game. And mental health is a big part of it. A lot of us invest a lot of time, effort and energy in a week towards our teams in terms of listening to pods, in terms of, I don't know, making spreadsheets and trying to plan ahead, etc., etc. There's a lot of us that probably invest 3-4 hours a week into FPL decision making. Understandably, when you're doing that, you're leaving yourself open to sort of higher levels and lower levels of mental health. Because if something you invest a lot of time into, you want good outcomes for, and when you don't get that, it's disappointing. So again, we all have different things that help our mental health and leave us more in the dumps, should we call it? I think this is one of the sort of key unspoken about often parts of this game, is that we have to find the best ways to manage. Play it your way, but play it your way, I think, as well from a mental health perspective. Not necessarily in terms of whether you want to play on template or whether you want to be full of differentials, whether you want a different captain, whether you want low ownership, etc., etc. That's playing it your way as well. But equally, having a better understanding of yourself as a person in terms of what's going to put you in a certain mood if certain things happen. I say for me, when I'm faced with 50-50 decisions, quite often I will use the phrase, what will annoy Craig most? And often I will make the decision that if it goes wrong, is going to annoy me the least. And that way, that if the worst happens in a particular game week, I'm not going to be too distressed by it. I'm not going to be too impacted in a mental capacity by it, because I've made a decision that limits that. It could always be worse. It could have gone the other way around. For you, I think you have to work out as a manager what's going to annoy you most each week. Are you someone that really is not a casual, but are you someone who likes to play short term? And therefore, if you're making a longer term decision, you're looking at 2 or 3 players and you think, well, this player's got a higher upside for the next 2 weeks, but this player's a better pick for the next 6 weeks. If you go for player B there because you want the player for 6 weeks, and then player A gets returns in the 2 weeks you highlighted them, if you're going to be negatively impacted by that, you should play the short term pick and then sell them, even if it's for a hit afterwards, because you have to understand what's going to impact you the most mentally. There's managers like that. There's managers, say, that have certain thoughts and feelings around certain players. I've heard so many managers this year saying, I can't pick Semenyo. Every time I own him, he does nothing. Every time everyone else has him, he does well. João Pedro, another one. Can't get any points out of him. Everyone else has got loads of points out of him. If it's going to impact your mental health to bring in João Pedro for the 3rd time this year in the hope of getting points and then watching him fail again, if you're going to think, why have I done this to myself for a 3rd time? I haven't learnt my lesson from the first 2 times. Then what's going to be bothering you more? You've owned João Pedro twice and you've got nothing out of him. Now there's a prospect of owning him for a 3rd time. What's going to annoy you more here? You not getting him and then him getting returns again for everybody else? Or you getting him not returning, and then for the 3rd time this year, you're disappointed? For different managers, the answer to that question will be different. There's not a right answer to that question. You as a person, are you happy to not own him again because you've cut your cloth with him and you're so frustrated by him, you can't possibly own him again? But then if he scores a hat-trick in that week, will that 17 points everyone else get bothers you more than picking him and then watching him get 2 points again for the 3rd time and then feeling like I haven't learned my lesson? Why have I done this to myself again? Again, no clear answer to that, but understand how it will make you feel should the worst happen, and then make your FPL decision based on that if you're not sure about João Pedro. The same, I think, at the moment for me with Cole Palmer. I'm happy. I'd be really frustrated if people have got Cole Palmer and he scores a couple more penalties, but I can't do it to myself to own him again and get nothing and get short cameos or get 1-pointers or things like that. I've made my decision with him for this season. I'm not owning Cole Palmer again. And if everyone else gets his points, so be it. But it'll be more frustrating for me to keep owning him for 1 points and substitute cameos and strolling around the pitch, getting nothing, than what it would be not owning him for 9-10 million and everyone else getting a penalty from him here and there. So this is what we have to understand about ourselves. And for me, I say I've broken. I feel like I understand myself well in terms of what's good, what's bad, how certain outcomes will make me feel. And that's why this is a disappointing game week. Not because of the outcome bias of Watkins getting 2 and Anderson getting 11, but because of the reason I reached that decision. And I should never have done it. That's it for this pod. I say this week for me is still not too bad. Certainly up against 3 hit teams. A 3 million game week rank with 3 players still to go, when most won't have that, is a reasonable position. Obviously, still doesn't guarantee that my rank won't go down. Who knows? That Vandenberg might score an own goal or get sent off tonight, or both, or something, and just compound the misery even more of benching Joachim Anderson. But we'll see. I'll do another pod later this week around my free hit. I've got some quite strong thoughts on where my free hit team is heading for game week 35. I've already activated the chip. Haven't made too many transfers yet because I'm just playing the price change game at the moment. But I've got an idea on what team I want. But so I just wanted to get a pod out here around decision making and around making decisions that leave your mental health feeling a certain way. And I think we need to take this more seriously in FPL, that it is the sort of game that has the power to negatively influence a whole weekend, impact your family time, impact time with your children, impact your other hobbies. And it shouldn't do that. It's a game. So we can make decisions that, for better or worse, make the rest of the weekend more bearable. And it's obviously good to celebrate the good times, but it's very important not to let the bad times, let's say, spoil your weekend, spoil your family time. So just bear that in mind when making decisions, because there's always multiple decisions each week. And maybe it's a different way for some managers to think about it. But I think it does make sense to try and just work through all the eventualities of how certain outcomes will make you feel, and then make your decisions based on that. So yeah, a little bonus pod this week. Thanks for listening, everybody. And I'll be back, obviously, before the game week 35 deadline with my my wildcard thoughts. Speak to you soon.